What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be doing a bit of a Q&A answering a heap of the questions that you guys asked me on my recent community post. Obviously right now we're all going through a bit of a rough time with this whole coronavirus thing, so I thought it would be a good time to just kind of do some different stuff on the channel and try to make it a little bit more entertaining for you guys while we're all in lockdown. I'm going to be answering all the channel member questions first, and then I will answer as many of the other questions as I can. However, there are like 100 plus questions, and so I will unfortunately have to miss some of them, so apologies if I can't get to your questions. However, since we are all bored and in lockdown at the minute, feel free to ask any questions in the comments of this video, and at the very least I will try to answer as many of them in the comments as I can. So, with all that out of the way, we're going to get straight into it, and the first question we have here is from Commander Blitz, who says, if you could have any part in any of the movies, who would you have been and why? To be honest, I'd probably have to say that I would want to be someone like Boba Fett, who just has a helmet on and stands there doing nothing, because I'm definitely not the best actor, so I think that's probably the best part for me to play, and I also do just like Boba Fett as well. Next up, we have a question from Eli, who says, with Scarif coming out soon, what other maps would you personally like to see in Battlefront? Can be any planet or location from any era. Well, my initial answer probably would have been Scarif, but obviously we are already getting that, so I'd probably have to say Coruscant. I don't think I can really go past Coruscant. I know that we've, received a whole year of Clone Wars content already, so it would be a little bit weird to get it right now, but I think Coruscant would probably be one of the most enjoyable maps to get in the game, just simply because of the sort of urban layout to it. So yeah, definitely Coruscant for me. Next up, we have a question from Alice, who says, was there a story behind the naming of Zali? If so, what was it? So for those who don't know, Zali is my beautiful little, well, not little, she's pretty massive actually, but little German Shepherd. And as for the name, pretty much, it's kind of a funny story actually. Pretty much we were on the way to get her. Me and my girlfriend were driving down, and it was about a 2-hour drive to get her. So on the way we were sort of thinking of what some names could be, and I just literally had a list of girl dog names on my phone. And one of them said, I think it was Zari, I think it was Z-A-R-I. And I read that out, and then straight away I just said Zali afterwards. And yeah, the girlfriend liked it, and I liked it, and then, yeah, pretty much stuck from there. Moving on, we have a question from my man Jazza, who says, what is the single best thing in Battlefront 2 and the single worst thing? Bloody hell, Jazza, that is a tough one. As for the best thing, I'd probably have to just say like the hero gameplay, even though the hero gameplay has, flaws in itself, but for me, there's probably nothing more enjoyable in this game than getting a hero in Galactic Assault and just kind of going on a bit of a tear with them. It doesn't even have to be like a big kill streak, just getting, just having some sort of satisfying plays. So I'd probably have to say the hero gameplay, despite, having flaws itself. And as for the single worst thing, I'd probably have to say vehicles, to be honest. I cannot stand vehicles. ATSTs are, probably the most frustrating thing for me in this game, because they are just extremely overpowered and they cost about 1/10 of what a hero costs. So probably have to say vehicles, but there are definitely a lot of bad things that I could probably talk about. So that is it for the channel member questions, and now I'm just going to try and get through as many of the other questions as I can as well. So the first one we've got is from Alfonso, who says, favourite Star Wars character and moment of that character. For the favourite character, it's definitely Darth Vader. I'm the biggest, Vader fanboy. He sort of levels above everyone else in terms of my favourite. And as for favourite moment of his, probably it's hard to go past the Rogue One scene. I think that's there's a lot of good ones in the OT as well, but I think the sort of, seeing him in his prime like that, just mowing down rebels, was pretty exciting to see. Next up, we have a question from Samuel, who has sort of a two-part question here. He says, who do you think would win Vader versus Kylo and Rey? And then in terms of Battlefront 2, who would win Vader versus Luke? For the first part, I would love to say Vader, and I do think, it'd be a very close fight, but I just think the 2v1 aspect, as well as the fact that Kylo and Rey seem to be hyped up to be like so powerful, and they say that they're a dyad in the Force and all that kind of thing, so it pains me to say it, but I think I'm actually going to say Kylo and Rey, even though if anyone's going to beat him, it's going to be Vader. So I really don't know how to answer that. If I had to choose someone that I wanted to win, it would be Vader, but we kind of don't know enough about Kylo and Rey to know how powerful they actually are. So it's a very tough one to answer. I honestly think I'm about 50-50 on it. I would like Vader to win, but I can also see Kylo and Rey beating him just because we simply don't really know enough about how powerful they actually are. As for the Battlefront 2 one, I've got to go Vader there, I think. Luke is pretty powerful as well, and don't get me wrong, Luke can beat Vader, but I think Vader is objectively the best in the game, at least in terms of the saber hero, so I'd probably have to go for Vader in terms of the Battlefront 2 one. Next up, we have a question from my boy Charmin. He says, how are you dealing with the quarantine, and do you have any advice for us on how to use our time productively? That is a very tough question. As for the quarantine, honestly, it doesn't change too much for me because quite simply I work from home, I study from home, and I don't find myself leaving the house all that often as it is. I'm usually just working, and every now and then I'll go out for a couple of beers with the mates and stuff like that, but for the most part I'm generally home most of the time as it is, so it hasn't really affected me too much in terms of my schedule. Obviously now, like, the girlfriend and parents are all home as well, so it is kind of, it's a bit different for sure, but yeah, the quarantine hasn't really affected me too much. As for the productivity, it's a very tough thing to answer. I've been kind of like studying productivity for about a year now. I've been trying to, there's a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of books and audio books and all that sort of stuff that I've been, studying over the last year to try and get my productivity up. So it's hard to say, it's hard to put it into, a few words, but honestly, depends on what you're trying to do. There's a lot of channels out there, like I said, that sort of help with that sort of thing. So if it's something you want to do, you want to become more productive, there's a lot of channels out there. Honestly, if you just search like productivity, there's probably hundreds of channels out there. But something as simple as just like knowing what you need to do and simply just doing it. It sounds, very simple, but we all know that, we know we have homework, but we'd rather play Battlefront, for example. So you just kind of got to learn to put aside what you want to do and make sure that you get the stuff done that you need to. And then once you've done it, you always feel really good afterwards. Like every time every time I make a video, for example, sometimes I'll, I might be wanting to play PlayStation instead of make the video, but I know that once I've finished the video, it always feels really good, and then I've got the free time afterwards anyway. So as simple as it sounds, just knowing what you need to do and just getting it done pretty much. Next up, we have a question from Tony Smith, who says, did the virus affect you in any way? So far, it luckily hasn't affected me too much. I'm, one of the lucky people that kind of gets to keep their job during this period. A lot of people have lost their job. That's probably the area that has affected me the most, in that my girlfriend literally just lost her job a couple of days ago. Both my parents have essentially lost their jobs, so for me personally, it hasn't affected me too much. I've still got a job, and honestly right now I'm probably as busy as ever, so I can't really complain. But having to see my family and friends kind of losing their jobs is definitely not the easiest thing. And then also it kind of puts a bit of stress on me too, because now I feel like I've got to essentially earn a bit more money so that I can help the family. So it hasn't affected me too much yet. I'm sure it will more, as this is only just the start of it. It's going to get worse, so I'm sure it will eventually, but as of right now, it hasn't affected me too much, at least for me personally anyway. Next up, we have a question from Logan, who says, after seeing Rise of Skywalker, where would you like to see the franchise go? Now, this is kind of a tough question. Honestly, I would like to see a lot more sort of Disney Plus series. For the moment, I'm kind of, I love the movies, but I do think we need a little bit of a break from the movies. So, yeah, honestly, just kind of giving us some more stuff. Obviously, we're getting the Kenobi series. I think it'll either be this year or it's probably going to be next year now, I guess. Getting Mando Season 2. Hopefully, like, some more animated series and stuff like that. Just to give us something to sort of always watch rather than having to wait, big gaps between the movies. But once they do get back into the movies, I'm hoping that this sort of High Republic stuff that they're talking about is going to be really good, and then hopefully that can be like sort of the next, next phase of Star Wars, is just to have this High Republic sort of era and just focus on that for 5 to 10 years, however long it's going to be that they're focusing on it. Next up, we have a question from Robot Runner, who says, if you could change one thing about Battlefront 2, what would it be? This one is kind of torn between two things for me. The sort of main one would be adding some sort of private matches, or even just, Doesn't have to be private matches, but just some better way of matchmaking, something like, you know, server browser, or just something like that, a list of servers you can choose to play on rather than just having to leave it to chance. Either that or probably some big changes to the saber combat, because it's just kind of a mess at the moment. It always has been a mess, honestly. Doesn't mean it's not fun. It is still fun to play heroes vs villains and stuff like that, but it's just, I don't know, some sort of more in-depth saber combat would probably be one of the ways that I would like to go. The next question comes from Beach Trooper, who says, I have heard a lot of people talking about this, so I'll ask you as well. Do you think that Anakin is balanced now with all his nerfs, or does he need a slight buff now? I definitely don't think he needs a buff. I don't think he's weak at all, but I do think he is somewhat balanced right now. The thing that I would like to change about him is probably just the ability combo. Honestly, just the fact that he can ragdoll you around, you know, multiple times in a row. There's nothing more frustrating. Anyone in the game, it's not even just Anakin, anyone in the game that can do multiple ragdoll abilities in a row, that just shouldn't be the thing. So I don't think he needs a buff, but I don't think he needs a nerf either, really. I think maybe just putting some sort of little, you know, delay between using his abilities, not anything big, just like a few seconds, so that, you know, he can't pull you towards him and then do a heroic might straight away, something like that. I think that's probably the most frustrating part about him, but I definitely don't think he's, you know, overpowered anymore either. Next up, we have the Pie Guy, who says, what is your favourite type of alcohol? I'm definitely a beer guy for the most part. Most of what I drink is beer, but no, most of the alcohol that I drink is beer. But I do like a bit of whiskey or a bit of bourbon there as well, so I'd probably just say beer, but honestly, there's not much that I don't like drinking. There's not many types of alcohol that I don't really like, to be honest. Next up, we have a question from my boy Simon, who says, just got two simple game-related questions. Battlefield or Battlefront, and Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption? It seems Simon knows me too well from the Discord. I know that he knows that this is a tough question for me. So, Battlefield or Battlefront? It's really torn. I've played much more Battlefield in my day. That's probably that and Call of Duty are probably tied for like the most, you know, shooters that I've played. But before Battlefront, I probably played like 5 to 6 years of almost exclusively Battlefield. So I'm a big fan of Battlefield, but at the same time, Battlefront is not only one of my favourite games, but it's also Star Wars and it's also my job. So it's a very tough question. Just as a game that I prefer more, I'd honestly say Battlefield as a franchise. Battlefront 2 is amazing, but I wasn't the biggest fan of Battlefront 2015. So, you know, yeah, there's a lot more Battlefield games that I prefer over Battlefront. As for Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption, I don't know how to answer this. I would say as a franchise, I prefer Assassin's Creed. It's probably my favourite gaming franchise. At least the early ones. There's been a lot of ones, you know, the more recent ones that aren't as good, but the early, like the Ezio trilogy, and honestly pretty much all of them on the previous gen, and even some of the ones on the current gen of consoles, it's probably my favourite franchise overall. But both Red Dead games are objectively better than the Assassin's Creed games, in my opinion, and Red Dead 2 is it's tied probably for my second favourite game of all time. So it's a very tough question. As a franchise, I would say Assassin's Creed. As a single game, I would definitely say Red Dead 2 is probably the winner. Next up is actually another question to do with gaming, and that is from Pessy, who says, what are your favourite games of all time? I'm probably just going to list my top 5, honestly, because my top 5 is somewhat set in stone for right now anyway. My favourite game of all time is definitely Skyrim. That's like number 1, like way above the rest. Number 2, like I just said, is probably Red Dead 2. It's kind of torn, you know, equal second between that and Borderlands 2, but I'd honestly probably say Red Dead has moved up to second. And then 3 would be Borderlands 2. Number 4 is The Last of Us, I'd say. And then number 5 is probably Call of Duty Black Ops 1. Surprisingly, that's probably one of my favourite games of all time. I played so many hours on that game. So yeah, that's probably my top 5 right there. But it does even though I just said it's set in stone, it does, you know, it's likely to change soon, and it sort of changes up and down as I go. Next up, we have a question from Zach, who has, well, it's actually a two-part question here. He says, what is your favourite and least favourite part about the current Battlefront community? And then the second part is, what do you think the difference would be in Battlefront today if the launch of the game wasn't a mess? Favourite part about the current Battlefront community is probably just the sort of loyalty and the, you know, people have been playing this game since launch, and it's been through so much, and people are still here, you know, playing. I've got subscribers who were subbed to me, you know, a couple months after I started my channel, and I still talk to them daily. So probably the loyalty of the community is one of my favourite parts. As for least favourite parts, it's probably the clickbait community, which is it's more of a YouTube thing, honestly, than Battlefront. But just the amount of people who it seems like they're just so desperate for views and for clout that they feel the need to clickbait and, you know, just make up whatever bullshit videos they need to in order to get that YouTube money. So that's probably my least favourite part. It's pretty frustrating, even if I wasn't a YouTuber, just to see people clickbaiting. It's never fun. But as a YouTuber as well, it's like, I know that you don't need to do it to do well. So it's frustrating that they all, you know, those type of people think that they need to clickbait to do well, when there's multiple channels in the community who have pretty much proven that that's not the case. So yeah, that's probably my least favourite part of the community. As for the second part of that question, what do you think the difference would be in Battlefront today if the game, the launch of the game wasn't a mess? That's both a tough and kind of depressing question, to be honest. I think the game would be a lot more sort of advanced than it is right now. We would probably have a bit more content. There might not have been so many sort of bugs and stuff, because I think the dev team would have, you know, stayed a bit bigger than it is. So we may not have some of the bugs that we currently have. We may have even more content than I'm thinking, because if we had more developers that stayed, obviously after it kind of went to shit at launch, I think a lot of the devs got moved to Battlefield, which might have happened anyway, but yeah, it seemed like they kind of almost lost interest. Not the devs, but the, you know, EA, the executives and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think the game would be very different right now if the launch wasn't a mess, which, like I said, is kind of a little bit depressing to think about. But at the same time, from where it was at launch, I'm still 100% happy with where it has gotten to. There's obviously still a lot of issues, so I probably shouldn't say 100% happy, but yeah, I'm definitely very, very happy with, you know, 2 years ago, if you told me we'd be at this point with all this content and still getting content, I probably would have laughed. So I can't complain too much, but yeah, I definitely think it would be almost a different game right now if we had have not had that launch mess. Next up, we have a question from Gabriel, who says, if you were a game developer at DICE working on Battlefront 3, what would be the main improvement you would make to the game? I would probably, sort of touching on what I said earlier, I'd probably make, you know, well, not that I could make it myself, but I'd probably try to make the saber combat a little bit better. I think if we do end up getting Battlefront 3 at some point, I would love to have some more, I guess, like Fallen Order type of combat. Maybe not that in depth, because in multiplayer that might not technically work as well, but yeah, probably the saber combat I think would be one of the main things I'd change. Next up, we have a question from Ishan, if I pronounced that correctly, who says, does anyone help with your amazing videos? Thank you very much for the kind words. Currently, no. Currently, pretty much every single thing that I have done on the channel is mostly by me. There's probably been a few things I've been helped with in the past that I can't remember, but yeah, currently every single thing that I do is done by me. But funnily enough, I am actually, one of my friends, Vic, I'm sure some of you guys from the streams really know Vic. Vic is actually starting to sort of learn to edit and do a bit of Photoshop and stuff like that. So right now, the answer is no. Most of it's, well, all of it's done by me, but hopefully in the future, I can, you know, get Vic to help with editing and stuff, and then essentially bring you guys more content, because right now I can't really make any more videos, or I could, but I'd have to drop the quality a bit. So by having an editor, that hopefully will mean that I can, you know, pump out some more videos for you guys every week, which will be very, very exciting. Next up, we have another question from my boy Charm, who says, what game did you think you would like but ended up hating, and what's a game you expected to hate but ended up loving? For a game that I thought I would like, but I ended up hating, or I wouldn't say hating, but I'm going to say Uncharted, which I know, especially you, but most people on PlayStation are probably going to hate me for that. I definitely wouldn't say I hate it. I wouldn't even say I dislike it. I just kind of couldn't get into it. I thought I would really enjoy that series, but I don't know whether it was maybe hyped up too much, or maybe it's just not for me. I don't really know, but I've tried playing every single Uncharted game. I started from 1 and went all the way through. I haven't actually played 4 yet, so I'm going to play that next month since it's free. But yeah, I played 1 through 3, sort of just like the first maybe third of each of them, and I just could not get into it. So definitely wouldn't say I hate them. I wouldn't even say I dislike them. They were just kind of those games that it was just like, I can live without it. As for a game that I expected to hate but ended up loving, funnily enough, I'd actually say Borderlands. I wouldn't say I expected to hate it, but I didn't think I would really like it that much, just by the sort of cartoony look to it. But yeah, now Borderlands 2 is in my top 5 all time. So yeah, Borderlands is probably the game that when I first played, a few mates were playing it and they said, "Oh, you should get it," and I thought, I don't know, I don't think it looks that great, but yeah, ended up being one of my favourite games of all time, actually. And the last question for today's video is from Daki, who says, if you could get a mode added and or removed, what would it be? And if it's not too much to ask, what characters do you feel are missing from the game? For the game mode, I would actually love to have sort of a 1v1 mode, essentially like Hero Showdown, but just 1v1, with some sort of like leaderboards and stuff, make it a bit more competitive, I guess. That's probably my most wanted mode. And as for characters I feel are missing from the game, it's hard not to say Ahsoka and Ventress, just because we got all that Clone Wars content, and then obviously the Clone Wars is back now as well, so it's hard not to say that they do feel like they're missing a little bit. But also probably Jyn and Krennic, actually, now that we're getting Scarif. I really do think that Jyn and Krennic sort of feel like they're missing from the game, and other than that, there's no one I'd say that I feel like they're missing, but there's also just like 100 other heroes that I could probably list that I would love to see. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for this one. Like I said, if you do have any questions that you want answered, then make sure to leave them down below, and I will do my best to answer them all in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys stay safe, and I'll catch you all in the next one.